Hello, OT friends, and welcome to the Uncommon OT series. I'm Patricia Modis, and I'm your host, a Filipino-American, native New Yorker, currently based in Los Angeles, bulldog mama, and an uncommon occupational therapist myself for the past 22 years. On this podcast, you will hear me proudly feature the unique careers of occupational therapy practitioners working in non-traditional and role-emerging practice areas, settings where OT is uncommon. I invite you to receive a dose of OT inspiration, to learn, to think outside of the box, and to be energized and motivated to follow in these unconventional paths. Happy listening! Before we begin this episode, I want to extend a special thanks to Picmonic, our sponsor. If you are an OT or OTA student looking for an excellent learning resource and study aid, Picmonic might be for you. Whether you're studying for your classes or getting ready for the NBCOT exam, it is a visual mnemonic learning tool that has been research proven to increase retention and help students ace their exams. It uses audio-visual learning and intelligence-based repetition algorithms to help with long-term retention while studying. If you're interested in trying it for yourself, sign up today using the link in the show notes or using the code TRANSITIONSOT to score a discount of 20% off your Picmonic membership. Hello, OT friends. Today, I'd like to welcome to the podcast two of the founding members of the group, Occupational Therapists for Environmental Action, OTEA. They are a group of occupational therapy practitioners and students raising awareness about the impact of climate change on human health, wellness, and participation in meaningful occupations. So here joining us today are Madelyn Yoo and Alison Bode. Welcome to the podcast, ladies.
Thanks. I'm super glad to be here.
Me too. Thank you so much for having us.
Oh, I'm so thankful to you for agreeing to come on the podcast to talk about your work. And I'm super excited to hear more about your mission and your call to action, right? So before we get into all of that, though, I'd love for you to get us started by, just maybe telling us a little bit about yourselves, a little bit about where you're currently practicing or hope to practice, and maybe some of your favorite occupations.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in first. So I'm Alison Bode. I am currently practicing as a home health practitioner. I live in Denver, Colorado. I grew up in California, and OT is actually my second career. I was a massage therapist in private practice first, and then went back to school later in life. Went to school in Chicago, and then moved out here to Denver. In my free time, I really love salsa dancing. I hike, and then I also do circus arts from time to time. So aerial silks, stuff to kind of challenge my fitness.
Ooh, fun.
Yes, Alison is a very cool person. And so she was in Chicago for OT school. I'm actually from Chicago. I'm a new grad, but from Washington University in St. Louis, but I'm currently back home in the suburbs. I'm freshly certified from the NBCOT, which is exciting.
We're doing claps. We have to do a clap for
you.
that. I know that's a giant milestone. That's like the last one, right?
Oh, yes, it is such a big relief, but I don't have a job yet. So I did my fieldwork experiences, the closest I have to job experience. In OT, we're in outpatient peds and outpatient older adults, and those were both in the Chicagoland area as well. But for fun, I really enjoy reading The Atlantic, crocheting, and learning Korean, which is where my family is from.
Yeah. Well, where do you hope to practice, Madelyn?
That is a great question.
Right now, we could have listeners out there hiring,
Oh, that is true. I am very open to things. Right now I'm thinking schools. I like the pediatric population, and it's a really great opportunity to like be automatically kind of like enmeshed in the system with like teachers and parents and a community that you can get to know really well, which is also a great opportunity to start some initiatives, whether they're related to like pediatric like human development or with like climate change type of stuff like OTEA. So that's what I'm thinking right now. Who knows where things will take me, but yeah.
Well, I'm excited to hear about where things take you. I just, find you to be such a bright and inspiring young OT that you're going places, I think.
I hope
I
so.
think that's
Thank
for
you.
sure. And it's always just fun to, I don't know, for me to hear about what meaningful occupations my OT friends like to engage in. And so thank you a little bit for, sharing some of that. Can you share now with our listeners what, we're talking about this amazing group that you've sort of put together, or a bunch of really great OT practitioners have come together to organize this group. Can you share with us what inspired you to do this work?
I can start if you like, Madeline, and then I'll kind of just pass. So, being a second career OT, when I was going back to school, I was 30 by the time I went back to school. And I remember, like, right as I started grad school, I was thinking more and more about like environmental concerns and climate concerns. And there was a time, I think, where I even wondered if I had made the right choice becoming an OT, or if I should have gone into something climate related. And I love OT, but I think like there was always that concern of like, well, this is another really big issue that I want to address. And when, for me, this group got started, actually, I was looking at CommunOT, the AOTA discussion board. And one of our current members, David Thomford, had posted about carbon pricing with this, which is this idea within the environmental movement about how to reduce carbon emissions. And it very organically started a group of us who are kind of interested in climate concerns, just chatting. And then we ended up meeting over Zoom. And that was like this moment for me of like, oh, there's other people who have like both of these interests that are interested both in OT and climate concerns. This is really cool. And so we kind of formed as like one small group. And I'm going to pass it to Madeline because something else was like happening somewhere else that we didn't even know about.
Yeah, so similar to Allison in the interest in environmentalism, it was something that I had always thought about. Just as a kid, I would do like school projects about back when it was more colloquially known as like global warming projects, about like how the ice caps were melting and the polar bears were suffering. And then I got older, I was really interested in a healthcare career working directly with people, and I didn't see a lot of opportunity for environmentalism and healthcare to intersect other than outside of work. But I got really lucky because in the summer prior to OT school applications, I had stumbled upon the WFOT, the World Federation of Occupational Therapists, document from 2018 called Sustainability Matters. And it's this long report about how climate change and just climate chaos and changing weather patterns and things are affecting client populations that OT practitioners serve. And I had read through the whole thing and I thought, wow, really, this is really what I think I was looking for, but didn't know. And so I decided to cold email one of the authors. His name's Ben Whitaker. He's from the UK and he works with the Center for Sustainable Healthcare. And by the grace of God, he responded to my email. And so he actually had shared a group of people who from the United States who were interested in the same topic. And it was actually, we started meeting over Zoom, similar to the other side, at the same time that were not aware of at the time. And I was meeting with people like Dr. Moses Ikiogu, who I had read his articles, so it was wild talking to him in these like very intimate calls, and it was very humbling and cool. So we started as a group of a few people, and then we were connected by Bill Wong, and he was like, there are these two groups that are doing the same exact thing. And it was great because then we came together and then really started the ball rolling from there.
Yeah, you had a community of practice at that point.
Yeah.
Amazing. Oh, you're so resourceful and industrious. Like, I just love the action taking part of you, right? Like you were seeking out these folks, and and it's because of that kind of networking and those conversations that everyone came together.
Right. And a lot of luck too, just people being kind and responding to emails and things. So I know
Yeah.
that that's always a big part of networking is just people being willing to talk and the whole community of people who are interested in OT and in environment specifically, I found to be highly supportive, interested, engaged. So it's really great. I feel very fortunate.
I think part of it is also, like-minded folks just kind of finding each other, right? And when you're in meetings and conversations, everything just clicks. So kind of like this uncommon OT community that we've created here. It's, folks are finding comfort in meeting, learning about other OTs who are really, practicing in non-traditional ways. So precisely why I invited you to come on because, again, I know there are OTs who are also passionate about this. And there is, I don't think that there's a better scenario than putting a bunch of passionate OTs together in the same space.
Absolutely. And I think like as we've evolved as a group too, we found that our main purpose is kind of connecting people because everyone has such a unique perspective and knowledge base and expertise that when we start to get all these people together in the same room, Zoom meeting room, close enough, we get all these really cool ideas that develop and these really cool advocacy actions that, each of us by ourselves wouldn't necessarily come up with, but it's like the group together really creates something quite amazing.
Ah. Did you have any representation at this year's AOTA conference?
We did, I think. So, Carol Myers, T Stock, Camille Coe, they did a presentation at AOTA. I think they were one of the only, if not one of the few, environmental related presentations. There were a lot more at the 2023 AOTA
Mhm.
conference. So it was slightly disappointing just to see the prevalence of that type of content decrease from last year, but
Uh-huh.
we know that the fact that there are people still interested in engaging in the conversations at the national conference still encouraging.
Yes, it is. At least it's represented. Do you know what might be some reasons for the decrease in representation?
I don't know for sure. I think any time that any sort of like small size subset of something is gaining momentum, sometimes there's kind of like ebbs and flows. I know for a lot of people in this community, for most of us, this is not our full-time job currently, where this is
Hmm.
something kind of like extra that we're putting in. And so, between everyone's work life and then their personal life, I think the time that we had to devote to this just kind of like comes and goes and we're building momentum. But, we have those moments where we have to kind of focus on our main source of income.
Gigs. Yeah, your main gigs. Yes. Okay, great. So this might be a good time to have you tell us more about your group, the Occupational Therapists for Environmental Action.
I can jump in and start. So I think informally we joined as those two separate groups right around August of 2021, which is crazy to think that that's so long ago. It's been very much like a growth process where we as a group have just sort of figured out how we want to grow and spent a lot of time discussing what our objectives are, how we want to present ourselves, how we want to welcome people. And being a very like inclusive and welcoming group has been really important to us over time. We started with kind of the basics of just creating our founding document, which lays out a lot of information about, what is OT, what is climate change, how are these two things related? Because I don't know that those are necessarily related in a lot of people's minds, although we think they're quite intimately related. And then kind of just slowly building on that top of that momentum, creating a website, having blog posts, doing interviews, building on top of monthly meetings where we have guest speakers, or we kind of get together as a group to discuss different ideas and articles. And so it's been very much something that's grown as it has developed, and it's still in growth, which is great. And I think that's what makes it so interesting and dynamic to so many people, is that we're always kind of trying to build on top of what we already have.
Thank you for that. Anything you want to add, Madelyn?
I mean, that was a really great recap of like the past few years that we've been in organization. I know that we're also thinking about organizational structure because I don't, a lot of us are coming into this without extensive like technical experience being environmentalists or anything. A lot of us are just passionate about the subject. So it's really through the support of each other, and figuring out what we're able to realistically do from a sustainability standpoint. We have to think about kind of like Alison was mentioning earlier with like AOTA conference submissions, thinking about what we have the bandwidth for outside of our primary jobs, or for me at the time, school, and thinking about OTEA becoming a place where we can connect more so than have a rigid organization, like top-down structure, so that we can more organically bring about some of the initiatives that members are not only interested in, but inspired by kind of on from their own experiences and their own areas of expertise as well.
I was going to say, in our sort of current organization, what we do is as a group, we meet as an entire organization the first Thursday of every month, usually for about an hour and a half. And in that meeting, on a regular basis, we have a guest speaker, and our guest speakers range from a lot of different folks, always speaking on something related to occupational therapy and the environment. For example, recently we had Gail Fisher from UIC come and speak on the history of the concept of environment in OT models. She's kind of an expert on MoHo, so she focused on MoHo, but looked at over time how the idea of the environment has evolved from more of like the built environment to also include more of the natural environment. So our speakers talk about a lot of different things, and often we have a speaker in the meeting, and then we'll kind of transition to more of like a meet and greet where different members can talk to each other so that we can network and kind of build off each other's ideas. On meetings where we do not have a speaker, we do more of like a collaborative discussion where we're really hoping to get people together so that they can meet and they can be inspired by what's already happening, and then kind of meet the people that they need to make whatever their idea is come to life, or just like learn a little bit more about the process. So that's kind of like the crux of our organization at this point. We also have like a very extensive website with lots of resources on it, but the main part is our monthly meetings.
Okay, got it. And so I have a few questions. So there's a group of individuals, you're all meeting monthly, there's an agenda and almost like an organized kind of way of presenting information. That way everyone can learn. Who organizes all of this? And is this a volunteer post, or how does this work?
I'll start, Madelyn. Feel free to jump in whenever. So when we were first sort of getting together, it was like this very amorphous of just people meeting who were interested in the same thing. And I think the structure kind of evolved a little bit naturally. We had set up, like, for my end of what was the beginning, sort of like monthly meetings where we got together and like discussed ideas. And the people that were showing up regularly to these meetings just kind of naturally became like the leaders of sorts of the group that sort of were like, hey, what if we take it in this direction? After we joined together as two groups, I think the same thing sort of happened where there was people that were showing up sort of more consistently. And at one point I said, hey, you guys, we're showing up consistently. Do you want to become the leadership team and we can kind of take this in a certain direction? And we decided to do that. And it was always very important to us to take everyone's opinion and sort of like be very democratic in the way that we approach things. But we are the leadership team because we've just chosen to show up and keep doing this.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of how our end of the very beginning small group started as well. And with the idea of the leadership team, we avoided the typical roles like president, vice president, that kind of thing, because we wanted it to be really collaborative and supportive of each other, because there are times where maybe it's one person has more on their plate, so they're not able to devote as much time to OTA. So then others can kind of step in. So our leadership team now is about 5 people, 5 or 6,
Hmm.
and it's working really well, smoothly, and it's it's been a great way to kind of steer the organization in a direction where we can be organized and we can have our meetings be, although not short enough to be an hour, but an hour and a half is, we're really making the most of every minute of that hour and a half too.
Ah, I love that you're getting together every month and just, exchanging, yeah, just exchanging ideas and learning from each other. So happy you found each other.
Me too.
Me, I feel like I don't know if Madeline, you share the same experience, but like the more I think about the climate crisis and the environment, like the more sort of existential anxiety it brings up for me. And this is very well documented in the research too. This is not an individual thing, but my experience has been having a group like this of people who also say, "Oh, I noticed this and I'm concerned about this and I want to do something about it," and are like
Hmm.
taking these proactive steps has been one of the most like protective factors for my mental health, because it's this comfort of knowing, oh, other people who are really smart care and they're in this together. And I think like that's incredibly helpful for me, because I know that, I'm not the only one that feels that way. Sometimes our clients or our patients feel that way too. And
Hmm.
having a little bit of experience of like, oh, this is what's been really helpful for me. So if someone else is expressing these same concerns, I have a few pieces that I can kind of guide them into what has been helpful in my case.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
Alison, you put that really well.
yes, I think that's really it brings me to another question, right? Like that's I absolutely hear that point. So here we are, OTs, right? And we're all we're all interested in making the world better, right? Some of us are care about more, sustainability and really taking action towards that. What is it that you want OTs to hear? What is it that you want OTs to, or you talked earlier about sort of the relationship between OT and climate change. Maybe that would be a good place to start. For some OTs out there who may not know what the relationship is between the two, examples or just some direction.
Yeah. So from a really theoretical standpoint, which I know isn't ideal in like the practical nature of clinical practice, but with human occupation being the main thing that we are focused on, and the everyday activities of our clients and of people at large, the climate crisis itself is unequivocally caused by human activity, which is, human occupation can be perceived as human occupation. So thinking about that being our main area of expertise, how do we help people do the things that they need and want to do every day? And when at the same time, those things are also causing wild rates of greenhouse gas emissions, which results in extreme weather events, air pollution, the multitude of cascading effects, from the burning of fossil fuels. That that's where a lot of our basic, I think, standpoint comes from, or our basic perspective comes from. But then as that manifests into clinical practice, I don't think that there's necessarily like a set, and Alison, correct me if I'm wrong, like a set list of things that we want practitioners to think or to do. But the biggest part is the engagement in this conversation as OT, as we started as a profession, is to address some of these very large societal problems that are coming about, and in a society that's changing, very different from the one where we originated as a profession. It's something that we inevitably have to talk about and to learn about and to adapt to.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that it's the awareness and the conversations and the interest of people and seeing those connections, especially as we're facing more things like wildfires and the air quality dropping, so that affecting
Hmm.
people's ability to get physical activity outside, which we recommend for mental health and physical health reasons. And that's just one
Yes.
example of many. But that's kind of where we are coming from. But Allison, please add more. Yeah.
No, I think that was very well said. I think we kind of started, like Madelyn said, from the premise that human occupation, at least the way that we have chosen to do it in a current industrialized society, is the cause of
Yeah.
the situation that we're in now. And it is also the potential solution to the situation that we're in now. And who better to address that than the profession that specializes in human occupation? Going further, as a healthcare profession, which is usually how we see ourselves, I think we would be incredibly remiss not to consider this, because when we start to look at the effects that the climate crisis is having and will continue to have on the populations we serve, we just can't ignore it. Whether it's increased heat waves, and many of us that work with older adults know that heat is this causative factor that can increase confusion and fatigue and pre-existing conditions, respiratory conditions, increased air pollution exacerbates those things. And so I think
Hmm.
we fundamentally need to consider this in the work that we're doing. And I think like there's, once you start to kind of think about the links between OT and climate, I think, at least for me, there's like so many different sort of straws that you can pull that it's like, at some level you can't extricate them from each other. They are fundamentally linked. And I think like one of my hopes of what people get out of our organization, or even just listening to this podcast, is starting to kind of like think about the links between those two things, maybe in different ways than we have before. And then just starting to kind of like turn that over in their head, because we definitely don't have the solution for all of it. We're just a group that's like, we want to address this and we want to get more voices in and more people thinking about this, because the more brains we have thinking about this, the better set we are able to address it.
One of the things I've been thinking about lately too is the opportunity that OT can have in the solutions for climate change. Like Allison was saying, how human occupation can be the cause, but it can also be the solution. And I think about the future of technology and how more sustainable forms of energy might change the way that we do occupation, especially in certain sectors of work. So then when you think about like OT work rehab, if human occupation is changing in that dimension, then who better than us to kind of step in and say, well, this is how we can kind of adjust to be more inclusive of the technology that is coming about. And I'm not necessarily thinking of any specific examples, but I just imagine that with what is possible with human ingenuity, and I'm also being very hopeful right now that we can find ways to be prevalent and be important in that transition, in the great transition as well.
Yeah, we're so creative as a bunch that, I think it's not a far reach for us to think of creative ways to reduce our greenhouse effects, right? Make less copies. I don't know. I'm already thinking about worksheets that I'm always like copies that I'm just making it work. So maybe making them a little smaller or just kind of making adjustments, right? And I think again, as OTs, we're super creative, and that's something we can do something about it, right? Like we can actually take action. And I remember going through your website and seeing one very specific thing that you had there about how do you take action, one of which was to reuse durable medical equipment.
Yes. I love that you transitioned to that too, because I think like, once you have sort of the concept of like, how are these two linked? Oh, this is important. And then there's the question like, well, what do I do about it? And I think sometimes like we get stuck there too, because it feels like we have to be able to do like one thing that will be the solution. And I don't think it's going to be one thing, right? It's like an assortment of little things, right? Like you said, like making less copies, reusing DME, like as a home health occupational therapist, even when people can afford DME, I will often suggest a loan closet. And I swing by the loan closet on a regular basis and just pick stuff up for people and then return it, so that we're kind of reusing things, especially if they're not going to
Mm-hmm.
use them long term. And then there's a million other little actions we can do, right? Like if you work in a hospital system or a school or anywhere else, you can think about kind of the carbon footprint of the place you're working at and maybe like how you can advocate to change that. Even something simple as like, gosh, the cafeteria is always using like single-use styrofoam containers. Like,
Yes.
can I get in and say like, hey, can we change this? What if we did this? Um, and then like even when it comes to like how we practice with our patients or with our clients, like there's a lot of occupational choices or lifestyle choices that will be health promoting to them that are also healthier to the planet. So for example, like some of my patients love their soda, right? They hate water.
Mm-hmm.
And we know it takes a lot more water to produce soda, and the environmental impact is a lot heavier. So if we can start to transition someone to like, you don't like water, maybe we add a little flavor in some way, but maybe we try one glass of water and then your regular glasses of soda. So we're both sort of supporting their health, but then also encouraging them to make choices that will be healthy to the environment as well. Watering a plant, taking up a garden, walking more often, those type of things. Like I think we can get really creative in the ways that we think about like, well, how do we address this?
Yeah, now I'm like, oh, ideas are coming up. We use a lot of styrofoam and single-use types of things at my workplace. And I think that's definitely something. So yeah, thank you for those ideas. It doesn't even just have to be sort of like on a patient OT treatment level, right? It could be more on a systems level where we're communicating with our ordering department and suggesting, right? It doesn't have to be anything monumental.
Absolutely. And sometimes I think some of the most powerful action too is even just being aware of these things so that you can start to lobby for greater change, whether it's, politically at a state level, at a local level, within AOTA, things like that, so that we're starting to encourage other people, hey, this is an important thing to think about. We need to sort of move in this direction. There's so many different options we have, and I feel like the different options we have for intervening can be very customized to the individual too. What do you like? Who are you? Who do you practice with? What
Mhm.
fits you? And then that's the action that you can take. It's not a one size fits all approach.
I hope that you'll have some listeners, some OT practitioner listeners who will reach out to you to ask you those specific questions, right? Because I can imagine, and it's natural for it to be challenging because we're so used to just doing things the way that we do things. And again, sometimes I just order something. I don't really think I have much of a say or any control over that, but I can ask, right? And kind of see where that takes me. So I love these examples of potential action steps that we can take out there in our respective clinical settings. So you've organized this group. Everyone's meeting monthly. You shared a little bit about a typical sort of meeting and the types of things that happen. Are there any specific action steps that you've taken lately that you'd like to share? Maybe even some of your recent challenges, some of your recent successes, perhaps?
In terms of successes, we have just growing in general has been a pretty big success, and just seeing that this is something that people care about, not just in certain parts of the country, but across the country, not just among new practitioners, but among people who have been doing this work for a while. There are some members who have been like Dr. Ikyogu, as well as Carol Dennis, among others, who've been doing some of this work since like as early as 2008. But we just weren't necessarily in the climate politically where it was prioritized in
Mhm.
conversations, especially within the occupational therapy field. So seeing them continue and persevere through time, through resistance to that kind of conversation, and to now, I think that that's been a great success having them, but also in partnerships with other organizations, including we have an ongoing partnership with COTAD. A couple of us were able to meet with a group of French occupational therapists at the World Federation of Occupational Therapy conference in 2022, who we've been in contact with, and that was very cool because they're also doing some really great work in sustainability as well, but more locally, or I guess local being the United States. We have our members conducting projects, which are member driven, which has been great. There was one of the original ones was looking in to see how students currently understand occupational therapy in relation to climate change and looking at the metrics there just to get a gauge on what students are currently thinking. Another group was giving presentations on our organization and also on the subject of OT and climate change more generally to different universities and OT associations. And we've had some success in the AOTA Representative Assembly as well. They currently have a few motions out or actions out. They had a sustainability task group. There's a societal statement, I think, that's coming out and a policy statement. So that's been really, really encouraging seeing that kind of work out of the American OT Association, because there have been other countries who have been kind of a little bit ahead of the game on that. So us being able to kind of catch up has been really great.
Just to add on to that, that was very well said. It's been very cool to see this group just sort of slowly gain traction purely out of the interest of a lot of people that it's just sort of developed over time. We were recently featured on the OT Potential podcast too. Dr. Akugu was on that, which was really awesome to see. We've had a number of members start doing presentation at different OT programs to reach out to students. University of Florida, San Jose State, University of British Columbia. And one of my favorite wins and successes of all times, when we originally partnered with COTAD in March of last year, we actually jointly did a fundraiser for Global One Urban Farms, which is a 501c3 nonprofit based in Kansas City, run by this very cool woman named Star, who takes unused lots and turns them into organic vegetable gardens, where she grows food and then distributes them to seniors, veterans, low-income families, and food desert areas, and actually brings like a lot of children from the local schools in to learn how to grow and sort of participate in that back and forth with the land. So they started to have a connection, and we were able to raise $1,300 for them jointly with COTAD, which was just a very like fun thing to see.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Yeah. I know you had asked about challenges earlier too. When it comes to challenge, I think we kind of touched on it earlier. I feel like the challenge is always balancing like the passion that we have for this work with the amount of time that we have to do it in, and finding ways where we are promoting sustainability on a sort of a global scale, but we're also working in a way that's personally sustainable to us so that we can continue to do this work for a long time.
Yeah. And along a similar vein, just thinking about the time commitment. And I guess, yeah, this goes with the sustainability piece. And I don't want it to be about like, this is a volunteer position, that this is an unpaid position, because not everything is about the pay. I feel that I've gotten a lot more like invaluable, kind of like Alison was mentioning before, like support and social connection from this group than I think I ever expected going into it. But at the same time, it can be from an hour standpoint, kind of like a part-time job. Yeah. But that challenge is something I think that a lot of grassroots organizations face at some point or another. So we know that it's just part of the process of growing and being kind of on the ground and figuring out how we can keep this going, basically. Yes. So yeah.
Initially, it's currently your sweat, right? Your blood, sweat, and tears. But I don't know, you're growing, right? Maybe would be a great time for us to kind of segue into money matters and fundraising. How can folks help you sustain what you're doing?
That is a great question. So as of 2 years ago, we started collecting yearly dues. Our yearly dues are very modest, and we use them just to fund our operations, our website, our newsletter, people giving speeches at conference, and we have our members donate $20 a year, or 10 is our student or budget price, but we are always open to donations. It helps so much for us to be able to have those funds so that we can do things like develop more relationships with COTAD, go to conference, and it just kind of opens up the avenue for us to do all these things. anyone who's interested can go to otenvironmentalaction.com, and there is a tab there with a donate button to actually send some funds, and anything is very much appreciated.
We're definitely going to list that link on our show notes so folks can easily donate. Obviously, we want folks to donate. But aside from donating, how else can folks get involved? How can occupational therapy practitioners out there who are passionate about this take action?
I think coming to the monthly meetings, if available, is a really great opportunity to just kind of meet everyone, see how things are, what we're talking about at our meetings. But I know that the time is usually after business hours, right when like dinner's happening or people are getting off of work, because we're all across the country. Our meetings are from 6:30 to 8 Central Time. So it's a wonky time across the country. But if people aren't able to come to monthly meetings, we have social media pages where people can engage with that content and find ways to get involved if they aren't available at those times. So we have a Facebook, we have a LinkedIn, and an Instagram that people can find more information about us on and get in touch with us there. Our website also has a page that's called Get in Touch, and people are able to send us a message through there as well.
Are there any common myths or misconceptions that you would like to communicate out there to OT practitioners or anybody who wants to get involved about the work that you're currently doing?
That's a great question. I feel like the first myth that comes to mind is just that OT and climate are unrelated. And I think, the more we sort of like dig into that, the more we see that that's not the case. And then I think the other myth that I would want to address is that in order to get involved with work like this, somehow you have to have a certain type of expertise. We all bring different skill sets to the table, but none of us are experts per se in this. We just have an interest in it. And then we started sort of like digging into it. And I think the first step to getting more involved is just taking that step to take that action of coming to a meeting or even just reading up on the website of different, we have a whole page of examples of how you can practice differently to be a little bit more sustainable. So not thinking that you have to be an expert in this before you get involved, taking the first step is what will get you closer to knowing more if that's where you want to be at.
And you'll learn along the way with everyone else.
Yes, that's a great one. Another thing that comes to mind is that the issue of reducing waste is simple, because I know that people can, myself included, can kind of we can be hard on ourselves when we're wasteful, or maybe we don't practice in a way where we're encouraging the most sustainable behaviors. But at the end of the day, we have to remember that this isn't me not using as much water as I could while I'm brushing my teeth isn't going to save the whole planet. Like it is a tough battle, and the individual actions do matter, but we know and we're aware that we're working with people who are medically vulnerable. So it is an ethical sort of issue to be asking people who are already in a vulnerable position to add this whole other sort of repertoire of behaviors that are sustainable onto what they're doing. So it's not just encouraging those behaviors, but also Alison and I were talking the other week, just maybe even thinking about trying some of those sustainable practices like in our own life as a way to kind of live in a way that we know is helpful to our clients, whether they're current or future. And that advocacy piece also being an important part of the equation as well, for not just ourselves, our immediate communities, but also the people who will come after us as well. So I know that that's kind of a long-winded myth, I guess, but I mean, complex problems, they can have complex solutions, but it's also just by nature what makes it interesting and necessary and really important to talk about now, especially as healthcare practitioners that are concerned with the state of not just our profession, but with all of the people that we serve and people everywhere, because a lot of people could benefit from OT, not just the people that we serve too.
Yes. And as you were speaking, I couldn't help but think about our role as educators, right? And I'm constantly teaching, showing someone how to do something or how to do something a little bit easier, right? And what I often face is someone who is willing to learn, right? And a lot of the folks that I work with are just not informed in certain ways, right? And I think my role as that educator, that informer, also gives them more choices. Our conversation today has just shed so much light. Thank you so much for helping me see the connections and just even my everyday work and your mission. Thanks too for organizing, coming together, devoting time to talk about this very important cause. I really hope that OT practitioners who are listening will connect, and through that connection, you'll all energize each other and really, bring you closer to your mission.
Yes, we always love having new people at our meetings. So for anyone that's interested, if you go to otenvironmentalaction.com, our meetings are listed there. And like we had mentioned, our meetings happen the first Thursday of every month, and they start at 4:30 Pacific, 7:30 Eastern time, and they last for an hour and a half. And the link is there on the website for anyone interested in joining us.
We will list all of those resources, all of those links, the donation link, the links for the meetings, just so that it makes it easier for everyone to be able to connect with you, and also your social media.
Yes, thank you so much for having us. I mean, the whole part of the conversation is not just us coming up and together with this organization and this cause and our interest, but with people who might not think of this immediate connection between OT and climate change. So your interest in not just talking with us, but in featuring us is also really encouraging and great, and we're really appreciative.
Thank you. I admire so much your dedication and the work that you're putting towards this important cause. Any last words that you want to share with our listeners before we end our conversation?
We're not scary. The meetings, yeah, don't feel afraid to come to the meetings. Everyone is very kind and welcoming.
That's good to know.
I couldn't have said it better.
So I'm sure you'll see some faces. You might even see me there one day. Hopefully our schedules will align. Yes. But thank you again for coming on, for sharing your path, for sharing with us how you came together, and for just inspiring us to really, when you're passionate about something and you find like-minded folks to, sort of geek out over these things that are really important to you, it creates magic. So again, I couldn't be happier that you found each other, and that other OT practitioners out there who are interested in your cause can come together with you.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that wraps up another inspiring episode of the Uncommon OT series. Connect with me at www.transitionsot.com. And don't forget to sign up to be part of the Transitions OT community. By doing so, you'll receive my latest compiled list of uncommon OT practice settings, the latest news on mentoring offerings, uncommon OT live events, non-traditional OT resources, and more. You may also follow me on my social media pages on Instagram and LinkedIn. And if you love this episode, head on over to Spotify, Stitcher, Apple, and Google Podcasts to follow, rate, and leave a review. I also ask you to consider pledging your support to my Passion Podcast project by being a patron on Patreon. It is very much appreciated. Sending big OT love. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.